Okay, we need to talk about Chloe. Chloe the dog. And I have been dreading making this video because I don't like my alternatives when it comes to Chloe. I am an animal lover, especially when it comes to dogs. And I'm fully protective of not just a dog's physical well-being, but their mental well-being, right? Dogs know when they're in good situations. Dogs know when they're in bad situations. Dogs know when they're loved, and dogs know when they're mistreated. And so that's why I didn't want to talk much about Chloe, because I think what Chloe may have gone through or may have experienced that night, the night of John O'Keefe's death, is probably equally as tragic. Like, people recognize loss and people understand when tragedy happens, and people, to a certain extent, people will experience shock or PTSD or whatever. And I gotta say, I think dogs do too. Those of us that agree that the marks on John O'Keefe's arm were from Chloe have all probably, if you're like me, you've thought, well, John was fighting with Brian Albert or Colin Albert or something, and Chloe felt the need to protect her owner. So Chloe thought what she was doing was good and helpful, and so she jumped in and caused harm to John. Whether she meant to or not, she was on a mission to protect somebody, or so we thought. How do we know that John even was in a confrontation with Brian Albert or Colin Albert? There is no guarantee that Chloe acted out of defense for her owner, because Brian Albert is probably the exact type of sick fuck who trains his dogs to harm people or harm other dogs. So I'm sad to say, this could have very well been a situation where John walked in the room and wasn't anywhere near Brian Albert. But Brian Albert sicked his dog, that he used his dog like a fucking weapon. This could be a situation where her owner is a sick, twisted fuck that uses her to cause harm. There's nothing wrong with a reactive dog. And oftentimes dogs are reactive when they're on a leash. They're more reactive on a leash when someone comes walking by. A lot of times they're reactive because they feel threatened or in danger of some sort. And then you have some dogs that are just like dunces and just want to go chase birds and ducks and squirrels and whatever. I get that. But there are also dogs who unfortunately fall in the hands of owners who are cruel people, who get a kick out of their dog being the meanest and the scariest and the toughest. So when all of the witnesses are saying, well, Chloe wasn't good with people, that to me is code for she's been raised in a horrific manner that would make her think that she needs to hurt others in order to please her owner. But I think the reason they became so fearful and the reason that they had to come up with the cover-up is because I don't think Chloe was defending Brian Albert. I think Brian Albert sicked his dog on John the minute John walked in the house. I think John walked in and either went to the basement or to the garage, and Albert was like, get him, Chloe. I think that is why Brian Albert has so much to fear and so much to hide, because I honestly believed he trained that dog to be violent. That poor dog who just wanted to be loved, who just wanted to have a good home. That's why it was so easy for them to part with Chloe. They rehomed Chloe without a second thought. Not a single one of them seemed sad or to miss her or anything. Upon further investigation, of course, when Yuri Buchanan is up on the stand, we find out, was she really rehomed? Because nobody has any record of that. Nobody knows the name of the people who supposedly have her. A person that has her says, oh, well, yes, I got the dog third hand, and the dog's been renamed. There were never any vet records. Like, again, if the Alberts were good dog owners, they would have vet records for their dog. And believe me, dogs aren't protected by HIPAA. That can be handed over. They would have a history with that dog. Here's her annual rabies shot. Here's her certificates. Here we have to have registration for dogs. Well, my dogs have always been chipped. So there would be some sort of vet records that even the Alberts had for the years they owned Chloe. There might not be a transaction paperwork when you rehome, but you would think that the new person's name, you would say, their vet would send your vet the records. And so even the new owner would have all of her old records from the old vet. And then everyone's like, well, it's the vet that owns her. Well, then Jesus, he's got to have some records. But none of that happened. I think Brian Albert sicked his dog on John. I think Brian Albert realizes that because the dog was so highly trained, that he could go down for intentionally harming John. So he disappeared the dog and he threw John in the lawn. And I think their intention was to pretend like John got hit by a snowplow. And then along comes Karen Reed, who can't seem to remember anything she did the night before. And there's our out. That's how the lie started. But none of this was Chloe's fault.